June 22nd, 1940, evening, in the forest of Compiègne. There's a reason the location matters. In the same rail car where Germany accepted defeat in 1918, France now signs an armistice. Cameras snap, officers stand stiff, pens move, and when the French delegation leaves, the mood on the German side isn't just victory, it's certainty. Senior officers look west toward the Channel, and they see the final shape of the war. 20 miles of water, one island, and in their minds, one conclusion. Britain can't possibly keep going. Not after what just happened to France. Not after the British Army ran for the beaches at Dunkirk. Not with Europe either conquered, neutral, or waiting to make a deal. Not with no friendly army left on the continent to fight beside them. Germany's leadership doesn't see a long war coming. They see an ending. And that's the key to this whole story. In the summer of 1940, Germany isn't just planning a victory. Germany believes victory is already decided because it believes Britain will act rationally and ask for terms. If you like WWII stories that stick to the hard reality, plans, numbers, mistakes, and the decisions nobody puts in the movies, tap subscribe and stay with me. This is one of those moments where the real history hits harder than the legend. Because from the outside, in May and June 1940, almost everyone watching reached the same verdict. The war in Western Europe was over. Neutral countries begin adjusting to the new power on the continent. Some prepare to accommodate German demands. Others keep trade flowing and avoid provocation. Spain's Franco watches carefully. Italy jumps in, hoping to grab a share of the spoils before the fight is finished. Across the Atlantic, the United States is not yet in the war. Roosevelt is sympathetic to Britain, but America is still cautious, and public support for deeper involvement is limited. The Soviet Union has a non-aggression pact with Germany. Japan is staring at British possessions in Asia. The map is shifting fast, and Britain looks isolated in a way no great power wants to be isolated. And when you strip away speeches and flags and pride, what do you have left? Math. German staff officers were trained to worship numbers, ammunition totals, vehicle counts, tank strength, aircraft production, shipping capacity. They were planners in a system built around measurable advantage. And, on paper, Britain's position after Dunkirk looks worse than bad. It looks unreal. In early June, the German High Command studies what the British left behind in France. It's not a few broken trucks or a couple abandoned guns. It's the heavy equipment that makes a modern army function. Artillery, transport, stores, mountains of supplies. Britain got its men home, but much of the machinery of war stayed on the continent. So yes, Britain still has soldiers, but soldiers without the tools of modern war are not the same thing as an army that can fight a mechanized power on equal terms. Then there's the armor question. Britain's tank strength at home is shockingly small compared to what Germany just pushed through France. Germany had rolled west with thousands of tanks and a system designed to keep them moving. Britain's home defenses in those weeks are scrambling to fill gaps with whatever they can find, wherever they can find it. Germany sees that and thinks they're finished. But the Germans don't stop at the army. They move to the Navy. On the surface, the Royal Navy is the biggest in the world. Everyone knows that. But German naval leadership points to a complication that looks, to them, like an opening. Britain's ships are spread out across an empire. The Mediterranean matters. The Atlantic matters. The Indian Ocean matters. The Far East matters. Britain has global commitments, and global commitments mean distance. Distance means time, and time is what an invasion needs. So the German concept starts to form in their heads. You don't have to beat the entire Royal Navy everywhere. You only have to deal with what Britain can rush into the Channel when the crisis hits. In Berlin, that idea sounds workable, at least at first. And then the Luftwaffe runs its own numbers. Germany has lost planes over France, sure, but German industry is producing, and the Luftwaffe is still enormous on paper. British fighter strength is estimated at a fraction of Germany's total operational aircraft across all types. German planners don't just see advantage, they see dominance. So the rational forecast in Berlin goes like this. Britain has no ally on the continent. Its army is battered and poorly equipped. Its navy is stretched thin. Its air force is smaller. Its empire is vulnerable. Its cities and ports can be bombed. its shipping can be attacked, and if Germany wants to invade, it can apply pressure until Britain realizes the game is up. But here's the twist. In these weeks, some German senior officers don't even think an invasion will be needed. They believe Britain will negotiate before it comes to that. That belief is not based on kindness. It's based on pattern. Poland falls fast. Denmark collapses almost instantly. Norway is crushed after a hard fight. The Netherlands goes down in days. Belgium lasts weeks. France, with its size and reputation, falls in a matter of weeks. Again and again, Germany watches governments make the same calculation: resist and risk annihilation, or negotiate and survive. From Germany's angle, that looks like basic logic, so they expect Britain to do it too. And that expectation shapes everything. It shapes how the German leadership talks about the future. It shapes how they allocate resources. It shapes what they think is necessary versus what is optional. It even shapes Hitler's thinking. Because the bigger picture matters, Germany is already looking east in its long-term planning. A secure West matters if you're going to gamble everything on the Soviet Union later. A negotiated settlement with Britain would solve a lot of problems. A costly invasion and occupation of Britain would create new ones. So Germany leans hard into pressure, intimidation, and the idea that Britain will come to the table. But Britain does not come to the table. And that's where the German staff work begins to collide with a reality they didn't want to face. Because planning an invasion of England is not like planning a drive into Belgium. It's water, it's weather, it's shipping, it's timing. It's the kind of logistics problem that punishes fantasy. July 1940, Hitler issues an order to prepare for an invasion of England, what becomes known as Operation Sea Lion. On the surface, it looks like the final step, the last opponent, the closing act. But read what this kind of directive means in practice. It's framed as conditional. Invasion is the answer if Britain refuses to negotiate. In other words, invasion is not the first preference. It's the threat meant to push Britain into common sense. Still, conditional or not, the German army staff has to treat it like a real plan. Because if Britain doesn't fold, Germany must either invade or admit it can't. So German planners start the job. They begin with a simple question: how many men and how much equipment must land, and how fast, to have any chance? And almost immediately, the answer is terrifying. In broad terms, the first wave needs to be massive. Hundreds of thousands of men, vehicles, horses, guns, ammunition, fuel, food. That is what it takes to establish a beachhead and then push inland before the defender can organize a response. But now comes the second question, the question that breaks dreams. How do you get that force across the channel? Germany does not have a specialized amphibious fleet like the one the Allies will build later in the war. It doesn't have purpose-built landing craft in the numbers required. It has river barges, tugs, small motorboats, improvised transport. In short, it has the wrong tools. So when German logistics officers run the numbers, how many vessels, how much capacity, how many trips, how many hours on open water, the gap between what you need and what you have is not small. It's a canyon. The plan on paper calls for a heavy, organized first blow. The reality of available shipping suggests something far smaller, far more fragile, and far more exposed. And exposed is the word that should make every planner's blood run cold. Because those barges would not be crossing a quiet lake. They would be crossing one of the most dangerous strips of water in the world, under threat from the world's most powerful navy, while operating at slow speed, in crowded formations, unable to maneuver like warships, and vulnerable to weather that can turn ugly without warning. If the Royal Navy gets into the channel at the wrong moment, it's not a battle, it's slaughter. German planners understand this. They aren't stupid. They start solving the problem backward. If the invasion is going to work, what must be true first? And the answer that rises to the top is clear. The Luftwaffe must dominate the Channel and southern England so completely that British ships cannot intervene, not do well, not have the upper hand, not win most fights. Complete air superiority, enough to make Royal Navy commanders hesitate to sail into the danger zone, enough to let slow barges crawl across open water without being wiped out. Now pause and think about what that requirement really means. It means Sea Lion isn't an army plan first. It's an air plan first. The Army can't move until the Luftwaffe breaks RAF fighter command and holds the skies. And the Luftwaffe can't just scare it. It has to cripple the system that keeps it alive: the airfields, the aircraft supply, the pilots, the training pipeline, and the command network that tells fighters where to go and when. German air planners sketch out what they think that will take: weeks of sustained operations, good weather, and tolerable loss rates. And here's the hidden assumption inside that forecast. They assume the RAF will fight the way France fought, bravely but predictably, rising to meet every raid, burning pilots and planes in constant battles until the tank runs empty. But even in the German system, not everyone buys that. Some men who have fought over France and watched pilots vanish into enemy territory see a different arithmetic when the battlefield moves across the channel. Over France, German planes fight over enemy land. Yes, but with forward airfields nearby. A damaged plane can sometimes limp home. A pilot who parachutes down over France is often lost or captured. Now flip it. Over England, German planes fight over enemy land with water behind them. A damaged aircraft may ditch in the sea. A pilot who bails out may be fished out and taken prisoner. Meanwhile, a British pilot who bails out over British soil can often be back on a squadron roster quickly. That changes the replacement math. It changes the cost of every mission. It changes what acceptable losses even means. And it's not just the air. German planners also look at the ground problem and see another trap waiting. Britain has raised huge numbers of local defense volunteers, the Home Guard. At first, German intelligence tends to dismiss them as poorly trained and lightly armed, more symbolic than lethal. But symbols can still shoot, and more importantly, symbols can delay. An invasion that works needs speed. It needs the rhythm Germany has used across Europe: break through, move fast, seize bridges and crossroads, prevent organized defense from forming, and keep the enemy off balance until the war is decided. That rhythm is hard on an island with narrow roads, choke points, towns, hedgerows, and defenders who know the land like their own backyard, because it is their backyard. Even small delays add up. Even minor ambushes force units to stop, regroup, and clear threats. And every hour lost gives Britain time to shift regular troops, concentrate forces, and counterattack. So by late summer, the Sea Lion paperwork grows thicker, and the list of prerequisites grows longer. Air superiority, not achieved. Weather window, limited. Shipping, inadequate. Naval protection, uncertain without air supremacy. Rapid breakout inland, questionable against prepared defense. Everything depends on the first link in the chain holding strong, and that first link is the sky. Which brings German leaders to the moment they have been building toward: the attempt to break RAF fighter command and take control of the air over southern England. They have numbers. They have confidence. They have a history of enemies collapsing fast. But they are about to learn the most dangerous lesson of 1940. The math of war on paper is not the same as the math of war in combat, especially when the enemy refuses to play the role you wrote for them. And next, when the Luftwaffe finally goes all in to forge that first link, when the big offensive begins, German pilots and commanders start reporting something that doesn't fit the script at all. Because Britain isn't fighting to look brave. Britain is fighting to stay alive, and that difference is going to wreck Germany's entire plan. August 1940. Germany's leaders still talk like the ending is close. The invasion plan sits on desks. Barges are gathered. Staff maps are covered in arrows. But behind all the talk of Sea Lion, everybody in the room knows the truth. Nothing moves until the RAF is broken. Germany doesn't need a small edge in the air. It needs the kind of control that makes the channel a no-go zone for British warships and leaves British fighters too weak to matter. So the Luftwaffe prepares its big push. This offensive is sold as a timetable: 4 weeks. Intensive operations, grind down fighter command, smash its airfields, break its system. And the invasion problem becomes manageable. That word, manageable, is doing a lot of work. Because the Luftwaffe is not just trying to win dogfights. It's trying to destroy an entire machine. The squadrons, the pilots, the bases, the repair crews, and the command network that tells fighters where to intercept. And Germany believes it has a model for how this goes. They've just watched it happen across Europe. In Poland and France, German air power hits hard, fast, and in volume. Airfields get hammered, aircraft get caught on the ground, communications get disrupted, the defender reacts late, wastes strength, and then collapses. The Luftwaffe expects the RAF to behave like that, rising to meet everything until it runs out of planes and pilots. But Britain does something that immediately irritates German commanders and confuses their planning. Britain doesn't take the bait. The RAF does not fly like an air force chasing glory. It flies like an air force fighting for survival. British pilots don't rise for every raid. They don't burn themselves out just to prove something. They pick moments. They engage where it matters. They disengage when it's smart. From the German cockpit, it feels wrong, like the RAF is refusing to play fair. From the British side, it's simple. Every day fighter command stays functional is a victory. And it doesn't take long for German pilots to notice the reversal that changes everything when you fight over enemy territory. Over France, German pilots often fight close to their forward bases. Damaged planes can sometimes limp back. A pilot who bails out over France is usually gone, captured, killed, or stuck behind enemy lines. Over England, it's flipped. A German plane damaged over southern England is often a total loss. It may ditch in the channel. A pilot who bails out might land in British hands and spend the rest of the war behind wire. Meanwhile, British pilots who bail out over their own country are often back in action quickly. Even if they're shaken, even if they're bruised, they're not removed from the war in the way German pilots are. That is not a romantic detail. That is math. A pilot is not just a body. A trained fighter pilot is time, resources, and experience packed into one person. When Germany loses pilots over England, it loses them permanently. Britain fighting at home can often recycle the same men back into the fight. So early on, the Luftwaffe's plan starts running into an unpleasant truth. Even when Germany wins an engagement, the long-term exchange may still favor Britain. And then there's the other factor that keeps showing up in German reports like a bad dream. The RAF knows they're coming. German formations assemble over occupied territory and the French coast. They move toward the Channel, and by the time they reach the English coastline, British fighters are already at altitude, in position, waiting. From the German view, surprise is dying. And surprise is everything in air warfare. Surprise is how you catch planes on the ground. Surprise is how you trap squadrons during landing. Surprise is how you overwhelm defenses before they can organize. Britain isn't allowing that, because Britain has a system. It's not just pilots in the sky. It's radar stations, observers, a command network, controllers, telephone lines, plotting rooms, and a decision-making loop that can turn early warning into an interception. Germany can hit pieces of it, bomb some stations, damage a site, disrupt a line. But it's hard to blind completely, and Britain has redundancy. Gaps can be filled with other stations and observer reports. Repairs happen fast, and as long as that system stays mostly alive, the Luftwaffe fights a defender who sees the punch coming and can brace for it. That changes everything. Germany still has numbers. Germany still has excellent pilots. Germany still has experienced units, but the battle becomes a grind. A daily wearing down, not the fast knockout Germany is used to. As August drags on, German operational notes begin to show a different tone. Not panic, unease. Sortie rates start to strain. Planes need maintenance. Crews get exhausted. Losses accumulate in a way that paper strength doesn't show. You can have 2,600 operational aircraft on paper, but if a big chunk of them are down for repair or pilot rest, that strength doesn't show up over England at the moment you need it. The Luftwaffe also runs into a second surprise. Britain is replacing planes and pilots more effectively than German intelligence expected. That doesn't mean Britain is swimming in resources. It means the German assumption, they'll run out first, is not happening fast enough to fit the promised 4-week timeline. And time matters more than Germany wants to admit, because the invasion is not a year-round option. The Channel is not a stable highway. It's an unpredictable barrier. The weather window for moving thousands of men in barges is narrow. As summer fades, those windows become fewer and riskier. So every day the RAF remains alive is not just a day Britain survives. It's a day the invasion becomes less realistic. That clock is ticking behind everything. Now, in the Luftwaffe, some men start putting the new reality into blunt language. Germany can achieve temporary local advantage when it shows up in strength, but it can't achieve the permanent crushing air supremacy that Sea Lion requires. Those are not the same thing. Air superiority for a few hours over a target is one thing. Air supremacy, where the defender can no longer meaningfully intervene, is another, and Sea Lion demands the second. As the Luftwaffe presses, it tries different approaches: airfields, infrastructure, radar sites, command nodes. The idea is to cut the system apart faster than Britain can patch it. But Britain keeps improvising and adapting. Fighters are dispersed, squadrons are rotated, damage is repaired, airfields keep operating, and meanwhile the British home field advantage keeps working quietly in the background. German pilots lost over England are lost for good. British pilots lost over Britain often return. German planes ditch in the sea. British planes crash on land where salvage and repair are possible. German bombers must cross water, burn fuel, and operate at the edge of range. British fighters operate close to home. Those are structural advantages that don't show up in a simple aircraft count, but they shape the battle day after day. By early September, Germany's leadership has a problem. The Luftwaffe is not delivering the clean result it promised, and the invasion plan cannot wait forever. So the Luftwaffe's leadership, frustrated by the RAF's refusal to collapse, shifts its focus. Instead of concentrating on the air battle's system targets, Germany begins striking London more heavily. The stated idea is to crack civilian morale and force Britain into negotiation. The hidden reality is simpler. Germany is trying a different equation because the first one, destroy fighter command fast enough to open the invasion door, isn't working. But this shift has an unintended effect. When Germany pulls pressure away from the RAF's core structure, it gives fighter command breathing room, time to repair, reorganize, and recover. So now Germany is bombing the capital, expecting political collapse, while the RAF stays functional enough to keep contesting the skies. And as that happens, the Sea Lion math gets even uglier, because while the Luftwaffe is struggling to reach air supremacy, the German Navy is staring at a nightmare it cannot talk its way out of. Even if the Luftwaffe did achieve a strong advantage, the invasion fleet is still a mass of slow barges and small craft. Those barges would be exposed for hours in the channel. They would be stretched along the coast. They would be vulnerable to night attacks. They would be vulnerable to fast warships. Germany does not have the surface fleet to duel the Royal Navy in the Channel. The big battleships Germany dreams of are not ready. The ships it has are not enough. Submarines are deadly against merchant shipping in open waters, but they are not a magic shield against fast warships in a confined, contested sea zone. So German naval planners build their whole defense concept on one assumption: British warships won't enter a zone dominated by German air power. But what if Britain is willing to take losses? What if Britain's naval doctrine is to sacrifice ships to prevent an invasion? That question is not theoretical. It's central, because Britain's naval leadership understands the trade. If Britain loses destroyers but destroys invasion barges packed with German troops, Britain wins. Germany can't afford to lose tens of thousands of soldiers at sea, even if it sinks a lot of British ships doing it. An invasion army drowned in the Channel is not a setback. It's a strategic disaster. And British commanders are willing to risk a lot to make sure that happens. This is where the German planners' assumptions about rational behavior start breaking down again. Germany keeps expecting Britain to preserve its forces, to avoid costly risks, to behave like a government preparing to negotiate. But Britain's posture is the opposite. Britain is acting like a nation that has decided surrender is off the table. And that decision makes the rational gamble different. If surrender is not an option, then risking ships to stop an invasion is not madness. It's necessity. So by mid-September, German leaders are staring at three simultaneous problems. 1. The Luftwaffe hasn't achieved the total air supremacy required. 2. The Royal Navy remains a deadly threat even under air attack, because it's willing to pay in ships to sink barges. 3. The weather window is narrowing, turning the invasion into a race against the calendar. And none of these problems can be solved independently. They're linked. No air supremacy means no safe channel crossing. No safe crossing means no army on English soil. No army on English soil means the war doesn't end. And the longer the war doesn't end, the more Britain's survival becomes something else. Proof. Proof that Germany can't just dictate outcomes because it won on the continent. Proof that an island with a navy and a functioning air defense can deny Germany the kind of war it wants to fight. Germany is discovering a limit. Not a moral limit, a physical one. The limit of power projection across water. At this point, Hitler and his commanders still talk about invasion in public terms, but internally, the tone changes. It becomes about prerequisites, conditionality, and timing. The language of certainty gives way to the language of caution. And then, on September 17, 1940, the decision arrives. Operation Sea Lion is postponed indefinitely. Officially, it's because of weather and continued RAF resistance preventing air superiority. In reality, it's because the combined math does not work. You cannot reliably move and sustain a massive invasion force across the channel in slow barges when the defender has a powerful navy ready to sacrifice itself, when your air force cannot fully eliminate the defender's fighters, and when the weather gives you only narrow windows to act. Germany can win air battles. Germany can bomb cities. Germany can sink ships. But Germany cannot create the exact combination of conditions needed to land an army in England and keep it supplied in the face of a defending nation fighting at home. And that right there is the heart of why Britain stood alone and still didn't kneel. Britain did not have to destroy Germany. Britain had to deny Germany its objective. That's what survival means in strategic war. But the story still isn't finished, because there's another set of German reports that will shock you even more. While the Luftwaffe was grinding in the skies, German intelligence was studying the ground picture in southern England, and what they found didn't look like a defeated country waiting to be occupied. It looked like a fortress being built in real time. And in Part 3, that discovery, plus Hitler's own mindset, will reveal why Germany kept expecting surrender even when the evidence was screaming the opposite. While the Luftwaffe fought its war in the sky, and the Navy ran the cold numbers on barges and destroyers, a third stream of work was happening inside the German system: intelligence. Because if you're going to invade, you need to know what you're landing into. You need to know where the beaches are viable, what defenses exist, how deep they run, how fast the defender can move, and what kind of resistance follows you inland. In June 1940, German assumptions were still locked in a single story. Britain is isolated, shaken, disarmed, and waiting for the inevitable. But by late summer, the reports coming back from aerial reconnaissance and intelligence analysis tell a very different story. Not a country collapsing, a country digging in. German analysts begin describing southern England as a project, systematic, organized, and growing by the day. Concrete pillboxes, anti-tank obstacles, minefields, barbed wire, prepared demolitions on bridges and roads, overlapping fields of fire on the beaches the Germans themselves had identified as the best landing points. The important part isn't just that defenses exist. Every country throws up obstacles when threatened. The important part is how fast Britain is building and how wide the effort is spread. The coastline isn't being patched like a leaky roof. It's being engineered like a fortress. And as the German staff tries to map it, the scale keeps expanding faster than their own charts can keep up. They start seeing thousands upon thousands of positions, some better built than others, but enough density to impose a brutal cost on any force trying to come ashore under fire. Now, German officers know beach defenses can be cracked. Germany had broken through major fortifications on the continent. Concrete and wire are not mystical barriers if you can bring artillery, aircraft, and time. So the deeper concern isn't the first line. It's what comes after, because the intelligence picture suggests Britain isn't staking everything on holding the beaches at all costs. Britain is preparing a defense in depth. That means the beach is designed to slow you, confuse you, and bleed you, while organized defensive lines sit behind it, positioned along natural features like rivers, ridges, urban choke points, and road networks. In practical terms, it means the landing is only the beginning of the pain. Even if Germany gets ashore, it still has to push inland through prepared zones, while its supply line remains trapped on a narrow set of beaches under constant threat from the Royal Navy and the RAF. Germany's style of war, rapid movement, deep thrusts, exploitation, and collapse, is hardest to pull off when the defender chooses where to fight and forces you to grind through layered positions. So German planners start to see a second trap. Even if Sea Lion begins, it doesn't guarantee a quick decision. It could turn into a grinding fight on hostile ground, with the invader's lifeline hanging over open water. And then there's the factor German officers had originally laughed at: the Home Guard. At first, it was easy for German professionals to dismiss them. Older men, limited weapons, uneven training, not the kind of force you put into a neat order of battle, but intelligence reporting changes the tone. Because the Home Guard isn't meant to fight like a regular army in open fields. It's meant to slow you down, ambush you, disrupt you, and make every mile cost time. And time, in an invasion, is everything. Imagine you're a German airborne unit dropped to seize a bridge or road junction. You land and move quickly, but every hedgerow, every farmhouse, every crossroads becomes a potential firing point. Not a uniformed soldier necessarily, just a local defender who knows the terrain, who has prepared a position, and who is fighting for his home. Even a short firefight costs minutes. A detour costs more minutes. A wounded man costs momentum, and momentum is what blitzkrieg needs to survive. Germany's fast victories on the continent depended on a kind of operational rhythm. Speed breaks coordination, fear breaks political will, and collapse spreads. Britain is building a system designed to deny that rhythm. Slow the landing, delay the advance, channel the attacker, counterattack when the attacker is extended. And while that's happening, the invader's supply chain, food, ammo, fuel, still has to cross the channel in vulnerable craft. German intelligence also notes something that's more psychological than physical. Britain is not behaving like a nation preparing to negotiate. A nation preparing to negotiate conserves strength for the post-war settlement. It avoids provoking more destruction than necessary. It hedges. Britain is doing the opposite. Britain is mobilizing civilians, preparing demolitions, organizing local defense, and planning for resistance even if occupation occurs. That is not the posture of a government looking for a deal. That is the posture of a society preparing for total war on home soil. And the intelligence picture gets even darker for German planners when they start assessing anti-airborne preparations. Fields are being obstructed, potential landing zones are being altered, defenses around key points are strengthened. Civil defense messaging encourages civilians to resist airborne troops immediately. To German officers trained for a clean seizure of key objectives, that message is chilling. If paratroopers land, they may face armed resistance from the moment they touch ground, regular forces and civilians alike. In other words, Britain is organizing not just to fight an invasion. Britain is organizing to make invasion chaos. By mid-September, these reports pile up on senior desks, and one conclusion becomes unavoidable. Germany's invasion plan in June would have faced the enemy Germany expected, a battered state, demoralized, disorganized, hoping for terms. Germany's invasion plan in September would face something else entirely, an armed fortress backed by millions of defenders in a country that has decided surrender is not part of the menu. So on September 17, 1940, Germany postpones Sea Lion indefinitely. But here's where the story takes a strange turn, because what's remarkable isn't just that the invasion is postponed. It's what Hitler still believes at the same time. Even as the military prerequisites fail one by one, even as the Luftwaffe can't deliver air supremacy, even as the Navy admits the Channel is a killing zone, even as intelligence describes Britain hardening into a layered defensive system, Hitler still leans into the same core assumption. Britain will eventually see reason. In private discussions and staff notes, Hitler's logic keeps returning to the same idea. Britain's position is impossible, so political collapse must eventually follow. If not through invasion, then through blockade, bombing, and pressure. In that worldview, the military difficulties don't prove Britain can't be neutralized. They prove invasion is an expensive way to do it. So Hitler shifts toward a different approach: continued air operations, economic warfare, and waiting for Britain to crack. And there's another layer to it that German officers around Hitler later describe, whether as honest memory or self-serving explanation, Hitler's complicated attitude toward Britain itself. He doesn't speak about Britain the way he speaks about some other enemies. He admires the empire. He imagines in his own warped way that Britain might be negotiated with, even partnered with, especially with his eyes already drifting toward the Soviet Union. Now, you don't have to accept every post-war recollection at face value to see the strategic shape. Germany is already thinking about the East. A major war with the Soviet Union is the kind of gamble that can destroy an empire if your West isn't secured. Imperial Germany learned that lesson in World War I. Hitler wants Britain neutralized, preferably without tying down huge forces in a long occupation and endless resistance. So when the invasion plan looks ugly, postponing it isn't just a military decision. It fits a wider strategic goal. Avoid a risky amphibious gamble, pressure Britain by other means, and prepare for the next massive move. That's why, to some German planners, Sea Lion begins to feel like something else. A threat, a lever, a bluff that has to look real enough to scare Britain, even if the people running the numbers don't believe it will happen. And there are signs that support that suspicion. The lack of urgency in certain preparations, the reliance on improvised transport, and the reality that Germany never fully commits to building the kind of specialized amphibious capability that a serious cross-channel invasion would demand. A nation truly determined to invade in 1940 would start building the right ships immediately. Germany doesn't. Instead, it gathers barges, issues plans, conducts air operations, threatens loudly, and then, when the math refuses to cooperate, postpones and shifts attention. And that shift reveals the most important point of the entire story. In June 1940, Germany looks unstoppable because its style of war is optimized for continental conquest, armor, speed, breakthrough, and exploitation. But the Channel is a different kind of battlefield. You can't blitzkrieg across water. You can't improvise naval dominance in a few weeks. You can't guarantee supply across a narrow sea when the defender's navy is willing to trade ships for barges. And you can't force surrender by logic when the enemy has decided that survival, not negotiation, is the objective. Britain's victory in 1940 isn't the kind of victory most people picture. Britain doesn't smash the German army in a huge set-piece battle. Britain doesn't sink an invasion fleet because the invasion fleet never sails. Britain wins by denying Germany the conditions it needs, by staying functional, by keeping fighter command alive, by maintaining a naval threat that makes crossing suicidal, by building defenses fast enough to make the landing and breakout uncertain, and by communicating a message so stubborn and so clear that even Hitler can't ignore it. If you want to end this, you have to come here and force it, and Germany can't be sure it can. Now, go back to that moment in June. The rail car, the cameras, the officers convinced the war is basically done. A senior German officer looks at the Channel and sees a country that cannot possibly fight on. That judgment is not insane. It's based on a pattern that has repeated across Europe. But the judgment contains a hidden assumption that Britain will behave like everyone else. And Britain doesn't. Britain is not asking, can we win quickly? Britain is asking, can we survive long enough to prevent Germany from winning? That is a different question. And in 1940, it is the question that matters. Because survival buys time. Time for defenses to harden. Time for production to climb. Time for pilots to train. Time for international pressure to shift. Time for material aid to grow. Time for Germany to face choices it can't solve by speed alone. By the time Sea Lion is postponed, something has happened that every resistance movement and every threatened state notices. Germany has limits. Germany can conquer what it can reach by land. But there is at least one place it cannot simply roll into and take, because geography, naval power, air defense, and sheer refusal combine into a wall. And from that point forward, Germany's aura changes. The myth of instant, unstoppable conquest is cracked, not because Germany is suddenly weak, but because one nation has proven that if you deny Germany its objective, if you refuse to collapse, Germany's strength does not automatically turn into political victory. So the summer of 1940 becomes more than the Battle of Britain as a slogan. It becomes the demonstration of a strategic truth that Hollywood rarely explains well. In war, you don't always have to win outright. Sometimes you win by not losing, by preventing the enemy from achieving what they need. The RAF doesn't have to destroy the Luftwaffe. It has to stay alive enough to deny air supremacy. The Royal Navy doesn't have to annihilate Germany's surface fleet. It has to pose a threat strong enough that barges can't safely cross. British ground forces don't have to be ready to conquer Europe. They have to make the cost of landing and breaking out too high. And when Germany realizes it cannot guarantee success, it hesitates. Then it postpones. Then it turns away. In October 1940, the invasion is pushed further, and not long after, Germany's strategic focus shifts decisively east. Britain has survived the moment it was supposed to kneel, and that survival changes the war, because once Britain proves it can stay in the fight, alone, the entire future becomes possible. Not easy. Possible. And that is why this story isn't about a simple hero narrative. It's about the cold limits of power, the brutal influence of geography and logistics, and the moment one country refused to behave the way everyone's math said it should. The world kept asking, can Britain survive? Britain answered with action, fortify, fight smart, deny the objective, and hold on. And in 1940, that was enough. That's the day Britain stood completely alone and refused to kneel.